Okay. Can you guys hear us okay?
We are live.
Yay. Please let us know if you can hear okay, because there's just always like that tech-y, I don't know. We're out of Mercury retrograde, so we should be good.
Mercury retrograde was a wild ride. I'm going
Wild.
to move my camera real quick.
Okay.
There we go. So
But
I'm like looking in the same general direction.
yeah, something close to. Okay, thank you so much
Hi,
for letting us know.
Sunshine Wilder. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know. So today we are talking about, so this is the last weekly pet roundup of the year. We're going to take the next 2 weeks off for the holidays, and Isabel has her
Wait,
kids to do.
Sailing Campbell, Sailing Campbell
Oh,
saying she can't hear anything. Hello,
um,
Debbie Ward. How are you?
hello, hello. That's interesting because somebody says they can hear and somebody says they can't. So, can you? Mm, I think we'll just keep going and see what people say. It's a
Yeah.
50-50 shot right now. But so I had sent a few ideas. Oh, good. Okay, you reconnected and it's working. That's awesome. So I had sent some ideas for the show today, and you said let's do the Purina donation one. So that's what we're doing, and I think it's terribly interesting, but indicative of a bigger problem. So just to kind of start us off, Purina announced another $4.5 million donation going to 3 different veterinary colleges in the United States. So they are splitting it up. It looks like 1.5 to each university: Cornell, UC Davis, and then Colorado State. And on the surface, that sounds amazing, right? That sounds like they are working to advance. Let me just read what these donations are supposed to be going for. So, at Cornell, they are creating the Purina Cornell Canine Health, Aging, and Mobility Program. So, over the next 5 years, this program is going to focus on advancing science and innovation in the areas of nutrition, healthy aging, rehabilitation, and mobility in dogs. That all of that sounds wonderful. We need so much. Like, I'm such a big fan of science in general, right? Like learning new things, learning how the world works, learning how we can optimize our lives, our health span. I'm such a big fan of that. So on the surface, all of this sounds amazing, and I haven't given you a moment to jump
No,
in.
no, I'm listening. I'm here. I'm listening. I'm nodding. You
Um,
go, girl. You go. I'm right here.
So UC Davis also getting 1.5 million. They're creating the Purina Distinguished Program in Gastrointestinal Health and Wellness. They're going to be studying gastrointestinal conditions, which are one of the most common health issues in pets. And by the way, according to, I think it's, I know Dr. Kendra Pope is the one that I heard this from. More than half of the like biggest cancers, not biggest as necessarily as in like the most devastating, but where we see the largest numbers of cancers are all in the GI system. So this new 5-year program will further knowledge in this field and advance canine and feline gastrointestinal health solutions. So again, we need this, right? On the surface, it sounds like we need this. And then Colorado State is also getting 1.5 million to support the next generation of veterinary scientists and faculty members through the creation of the Purina Young Investigators Award Program in the Center for Companion Animal Studies. This endowment will fund up to 12 annual grants in perpetuity to students and their faculty mentors to investigate and share scientific advancements. again, like I'll probably continue to say this. I'm just such a big fan of like science in general. But the bigger issue here is what most people are not thinking about. I think there are people that are thinking about it, but most people are not thinking about it, is that we have an issue in the scientific community. I don't care what we're talking about, human health or dog health, it doesn't matter. In the scientific community, we have had an issue since the 80s, since the 1980s, that it has gotten progressively worse, where science is not science any longer. There's we definitely saw during the pandemic that like science became an ideology, which in my opinion is very dangerous because of what has happened in the scientific community. It's something crazy. Like there's a crazy number of scientific studies that have been performed since the 1980s. So this is over 40 years now that have been retracted because they weren't valid. They didn't their research isn't being done appropriately. And when I say that, like I learned, because I have a bachelor's of science, I learned that when you go into a scientific study, your goal, you have a theory. I'm just going to pull this off the top of my head because I was talking about it this morning, that dogs with acid reflux have an increased level of E. coli in their gastrointestinal tract. Like that's something that we know from animal biome. And I was talking about that this morning, so it popped in my head. So your theory is that dogs that are presenting with symptoms of acid reflux are also have increased levels of E. coli. When you go in to study that, you are trying to disprove your theory. That's how science works. That's how scientific studies work. You are trying to disprove your theory, and if you can't, gosh, I'm sorry, let me take a sip of water.
While you do that, I'll say, hi, Bronwyn. Hi, gorgeous lady.
Okay, so you go in trying to disprove your theory. And if you can't disprove it, then the assumption is that it's accurate. That's how science works. That's how scientific studies work. But since the 80s, we have seen a huge increase in almost all the majority at this point of papers and studies that are being written are not being tested using the scientific method, which is what I just gave you. I gave you scientific method for dummies, right? So instead, they are, whether it is the scientist or the group of scientists themselves, or whoever is funding that study, says this is the result that I'm looking for, get me there. And that's how science has been conducted for the past 40 years. And so that's why, one of the big reasons why, in my opinion, seeing this is so problematic, and why we have to get back to science being science and not this ideology, and not just a way for a company, a multi-billion dollar company, to say, this is the product that I just came up with. Give me some scientific studies that show that it's going to work, right? Oh, Bronwyn says, do the case study on garlic for dogs. Yeah, oh my gosh. That's incredible. That's just incredible. The amount of garlic you would have to feed a dog. Anyway. But so on the surface, these donations sound absolutely amazing. But the reality is that, and universities need funding, and grants need to be funded for scientific research, right? Like this is something we know. We have to be able to fund scientific research. But the way in which we're funding scientific research is corrupt. So not only are we potentially, probably, most likely, having these veterinary centers being corrupted with where their funds are coming from, but also when we look at the education that veterinarians are getting in the first place, and I don't say this from a place like, obviously I did not go to veterinary school, but I have listened to so many veterinarians tell their story. I've had so many veterinarians come on my podcast and tell their story about their experience in veterinary school, their experience with minimal, depending on how far back we go, no to minimal education in nutrition. It's the only thing they're getting is whatever school they went to. It's like one of the like ongoing kind of jokes in the world I live in is like, you go to a veterinarian's office, you've never met this veterinarian, you look at their diploma on the wall, you look at where they got their veterinary degree from, you look that school up to see which big pet food company is funding that veterinary program, and that's I promise you that is the pet food that they're selling in their office, right? Like, this is why it's a problem. I'll let
Yeah.
you get 2 cents in.
No, it's true. Well, I mean, it's similar to, I mean, to me, it's similar to like lobbyists, right? We spend billions of dollars, like organizations spend billions of dollars going to lobby congressmen and federal agencies, right? They're swaying decisions, right? And it's similar in the sense that we want to find out who is funding the lobby, right? Like, why are they there? Why are they testifying in front of Congress? What is their goal? Because taking your whole organization from, who knows, like Utah all the way to DC to lobby is very expensive. So you have to see, what is it that they stand to gain from this investment? And it's the same thing. Like, businesses do not donate because they're kind. Like, the first thing that we need to understand is that donations are tax write-offs, right? So like, that's the first thing that we know. Businesses get tax write-offs for donations. So Big Pet Food could donate to anybody they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
anybody. They could donate to any organization. They could donate to Best Friends if they wanted to. That money that they're donating, the tax write-off is the same, from my understanding, no matter what nonprofit they support, no matter what academic, institution they support. So they've chosen to fund these 3 universities, and you have to ask yourself, why these 3 universities, to what end? What is it that they're hoping to get out of this other than a tax write-off? And so for me, it's always like, follow the money. And I know like some people think that that's like a whole, anti-vax thing, right? Like, oh, follow the money, follow the money. But it applies to everything. It applies to everything.
Reality.
It applies to my friends. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if somebody is promoting something to me, I ask myself, but what's in it for them, right? Like, you want me to join the PTA? What is in it for you? Why are you so adamant about me joining the PTA? Oh, it's because you want somebody to give your role to? Okay, now I get it, right? So, like, there's always a motivation. And sometimes it is like, we have so much work. Please help us. Come on, this is awesome. And sometimes it's, ooh, I want to prove that this food I'm working on is going to be super good for aging dogs. And the best way for me to do that is to get a tax write-off instead of funding it myself, and have this research done at a university where obviously I can maybe pull some strings to see if, like, I get involved in the way that the science is tested, right? Like, everything, like a science experiment can be done a million ways to prove one thing or disprove one thing. So how much involvement does Purina have
Right.
after they give this funding? Do we know? Has anybody asked? Do we have that information? Because that would be interesting to me. It's like, am I giving you this money and then backing off completely? Or am I giving you this money and supplying you like the food to test? And then, kind of asking you to go back and test again. Like, how involved are they?
Yeah. Well, we know that they are certainly very involved. I mean, they're arguably the biggest pet food company out there, right? If they're not the first, they're the second. Like they're humongous. And one of the things, I think this was 2023, maybe. It was a big deal in our community that uh, Cargill what is working with Animal Biome. And Animal Biome, who a lot of people in the healthy pet space considered to be like, this amazing company for so long. They do gut microbiome testing and they have various supplements to support the gut. And they are working with Cargill, and it was a huge deal. It was and one of the things, like I had Carlton on, one of the co-founders, on my podcast, to talk about it. And like, I didn't want to write them off. Like, that's something that we do very quickly in this
Cancel
space.
culture, yes.
And I didn't want to just completely write them off. I'm glad we have alternatives, like that they're not a monopoly in the space. But it did make me think a little bit about, I may never, ever in the rest of my life feed a Purina product or give a Purina supplement to any of my animals. But the reality is that Fortiflora, which is like the go-to, or one of the go-to probiotics that veterinarians all across this country recommend, is arguably the worst probiotic on the market. It's one strain of bacteria with animal digest in it, for palatability. And if they took the opportunity to improve Fortiflora, how would that affect potentially millions of animals across the country? Because this is the probiotic that so many thousands of veterinarians are recommending to their clients. So like, I say that because I don't want to 100% write anybody off. There is a potential for good things to come out of it, certainly. And I don't know how often, depending on who you are, what, like the space I work in, I am regularly seeing clients who they have been taking their dogs to various universities for specialty issues. So like, there is a huge need to fund these types of to fund the universities and to fund studies and to fund what these universities have going on. Like, I don't want to negate that completely. I just also want to bring up the conflict of interest that is there, and for us to like be aware of what's going on. And one of the things that I have no idea with the new administration if they're going to be able to get to this, but I know that, there's certainly an overhaul needed in the Department of Education. And there have been talks about how universities are funded and how so many universities make such huge profits. I know this sounds like it's going into another tangent, but really they overlap. The, student loan debt in this country is astronomical. And that, how is it that universities are so profitable? The students that are coming out of them are going into debt for the rest of their lives. And
Veterinarians, some of the
yes.
worst, yes.
And also they're getting millions and millions and millions of dollars of donations from all of these huge corporations that are swaying the courses. They're swaying the curriculum. They're swaying the, it's in my world, it's pretty common knowledge that whatever big pet food company is funding that particular veterinary university, that those veterinary students get that food for free, as part of the whole package, and it's of course they're going to have preference because they have such good, they have, gosh, I can't think now. They have positive associations with that brand of food.
Loyalty.
Very much. They're really, really good at creating loyalty in the veterinary space. All of them, really,
Well,
are really, really good at it.
we saw that earlier this year when there was a potential issue with Purina Foods. And
Yeah,
like if
we
you
did.
saw, and it's not just the veterinary community, right? Because they touch so many pet parents. So like the veterinarians will say, this is you cannot go wrong with Purina. So then that pet parent becomes a spokesperson for Purina, and they keep like sharing that information. And like I remember, and we were just saying that this is the rumor, this is what people are saying. And we were, you were very involved, and I was just kind of looking at the group you were part of, but I was also looking at comments in like just like media outlets. And it's like, I was wondering, like, are you on Purina's payroll that you guys are all like going to bat for these companies? And like, and this is not like just one pet food
No,
manufacturer. This is not
no.
just pet food. I have no loyalty to any huge conglomerate. Like, I don't know why anybody would. Like,
Yeah.
they don't answer to us, they answer to their investors and their boards. Like, they don't answer to the pets. They are really meant to make money. And it's we'd be silly to think that they really had like this great you know selfless thing in mind, when this is also part of their marketing strategy. Like, these
Yeah.
donations are part of their marketing strategy. And this is not calling out Purina. This is literally every capitalist,
Oh, for
business
sure.
everywhere. So it's like, we have to be careful with how much we say, oh, like they're so involved in education. They help veterinarians achieve their dreams of, they provide scholarships. Who knows what else they do that's really great. But at the end of the day, they're doing that as part of their marketing strategy and their tax reduction strategies. And
It,
that is
it
just how it's designed and how it works. So I do think that, because it starts like it's like the trickle down, right? Like in this case, it's like a negative trickle down, where it's like we have this controlling entity, right? Because where there's money, there's control. Then that controls the education, like you said. And like there it's known that they control curriculum, or they influence, let's say not control, but let's say influence curriculum. I mean, it's the same thing that happens, in like at the state level with, undergraduate studies. Like the cities, they influence curriculum because they get to make the choices about what's covered and what's not, what curriculum they sign up for, what program they follow. These things are not like always, just one choice. They have a lot of choices, and they choose one thing or one topic, or ignore one other thing to focus on something else. And it's always the goal is to either get more enrollment, or get more loyal followers, or get a tax write-off. There's always like a marketing or business strategy behind all this. And again, I asked, like, it'd be cool if it was, just a donation and I pull away, but that's not how it works. Like, a lot of times, and something that I think a lot of pet parents don't know, is that, you have people from these big pet food manufacturers educating on pet nutrition in universities. And that in itself, without any kind of exchange of money, is a conflict of interest, because you're getting the information from somebody who stands to make a profit off of the information that they're providing, right? So like, it's the same thing as the veterinarians who sell the prescription diet. Like, they're not only informing you that this option exists, they're making revenues from selling it to you that day when you leave. And hyping you up about how beneficial it's going to be, when it may or may not be. But so you have to wonder, like, if they stand to make a profit off of this, or any kind of revenues off of this, then is it really truly the best information that they can provide me? As a student, I would be like, I will take whatever money you can give me if it helps me get through veterinary school, and then I'll learn later. But then they get into like their practice and they don't necessarily learn later because it's not that easy for veterinarians to, first of all, I mean, they have continuing education credits that they have to like pursue. But again, like a lot of those CEUs are provided at conferences that are sponsored by big pet foods. So again, they're like always influencing, they're always there, providing the information that is beneficial for them, and like you said, based on science that they've funded. So if they've funded the science and they've influenced the way the testing is done, then is it the best science that we have to go off of? And for
Yeah.
me, that's always the question, like, is this the best that we have? Is it the only that we have? Because it's the only thing that we had money to test.
Yeah. And research studies are expensive. Like,
Exactly. Somebody has
it's
to pay for them.
not easy to get a research study done. And Bronwyn has a bunch of comments in here that I want to get to, but uh, it's very insidious in that you were talking about, them teaching on nutrition while profiting off of selling the food that they're telling you is the best, right? And I think it's very unfortunate that we let that kind of thing happen. Now, we do need education on nutrition. Like it's so sad to me that they are making the food that are making all of these animals sick. And I don't say that to be like Purina specifically. I just mean ultra processed foods in general. I don't care what species you are, we are not designed to eat ultra processed foods. They're making the food that's making the animals sick and then funding the studies for fixing the problems, right? Like,
And then
how
creating the supplements to
and then
address the
yes,
problem.
and then creating supplements to address the issues. So it's very much like the FDA. Like, why is Food and Drug in the same administration? Why why is Big Pet Food teaching veterinary students at all? Like, it is so backwards. It is so
Yeah.
backwards.
And then you have to ask, like, who would fund it otherwise?
Right.
What science would we
Who backs
have?
the
What
right?
science would we have if none of these
Mhm.
conglomerates sponsored it? We wouldn't
Yeah.
have science. Like, I don't think we'd have it. Like, the
Well,
universities would maybe make a smaller profit because they'd have to do something to, like, prove that they're actually doing stuff in like the sciences. But the who would fund it? Like,
right.
nonprofits? You know what I mean? Like, it's
Well,
expensive, and the nonprofits that are really successful are also, being influenced in so many
yeah.
ways. So
Yeah.
it's I just don't know who would do it
Well, I think historically
before
it's
40 years ago.
well, yeah. Historically, it's governments, which are taxpayer, really. Governments don't produce anything. They're just taking money from taxpayers, from citizens. Um, that's a whole other story. But so governments and philanthropists, right? That's who fund. And so we would be a whole lot more selective in the studies that are being done. I mean, crazy things our government is funding. Like, I don't know what I heard the other week, like cats on treadmills in Russia. I have no idea. Like, there's crazy things that we're paying for to be studied. We would have to obviously have to be much more selective. And just like what when we were talking about cancer the other week, something like 90-95% of the studies being done on cancer are genetic reasons for cancer, when 90 to 95% of cancers are caused by lifestyle. So a lot of that would have to be corrected. Like, we would actually have to study the things that matter and not just whatever somebody decides they want to study because they're bored that day, right? Like, the whole field needs an overhaul. And a lot of that would just have to be corrected for, which I don't think is a bad thing.
It's never gonna happen. It's never gonna
There's
happen. It's never gonna
so
happen.
much wrong.
Universities are never gonna stop taking donations from these
No.
conglomerates. Like, they're just not. Like, whether it's big pet food, big ag, big chem, pharmaceuticals, like, they're in everything. They're in every industry, right? And like, that's why you go to your doctor and you see a pharmaceutical rep come in with like coffees for everybody, and like,
Yeah.
they're working it. They're reminding people that they have this study and they have this medicine for this issue, and that
Mhm.
they're there and they're very good at what they do. And so you have to, I mean, I feel like maybe I'm just like cynical, but I just don't see it ever changing. I feel like the money's always gonna walk, and shit's always gonna, like.
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm pretty cynical about it as well, quite honestly. I think, again, going back to, you have to follow the money. So the only way to correct something like that would be, the only way for Purina to get a tax write-off, or just as an example, the only way for Purina to be able to use this as a tax write-off would be if it were genuinely a donation and they had no involvement in the studies, right? Like, and then they
And
would think
I don't
twice
know,
about
like,
it.
how much do they have? Like, I'm serious. Like, I looked, and it's hard to find this information online. Like, when I searched Google AI. I said my search was, how do pet food companies influence veterinary medicine? That was my question. And the AI overview is, pet food companies influence veterinary medicine by funding research at veterinary schools, providing educational materials and continuing education courses for veterinarians, sometimes sponsoring specific dietary recommendations, and generally cultivating positive relationships with vets, which can indirectly influence the pet food brands they recommend to clients. This can raise concerns about potential conflicts of interest depending on the extent of the relationship. And so
Yeah.
this is far, like, known far and wide. It's not like, we're talking about conflict of interest. They happen in every industry. This is just capitalism at work. But what's the alternative? Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
would happen otherwise? Like, nothing. And I don't see that it's going to change. But I do think that we as consumers, like we always say here, is we need to be educated consumers. We need to know, every time we hear like this new study, and it's all over the media, right? New study says that, well, I just say one that's completely benign. New study says that female dogs are more judgy than male dogs. That one I just saw recently. And you're like, why did we test for this? Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
maybe this just happened to be come out of a study that had nothing to do with judgment, and they just observed this and now they're sharing it. Super cool. Interesting, not going to change your life. You know what I mean? Like, kind of, I have a female dog that I do think is a lot more judgmental. And like, I had a guest on my show that said that when female dogs have female owners that are anxious, they tend to be more anxious. They like take on more the anxiety of the female of the house than the male, just because I guess they like commiserate with us. So like,
Yeah.
these things are interesting, but like, does it impact my pocketbook? No.
Yeah.
Does it impact my pet's longevity for me to know that she's picking up on my anxiety? No. Does it impact her life or quality of life for me to know? Well, mostly no. That she's judging me? No, because I'm mature enough to not judge her back. But like, when it affects your pocketbook, your pet's longevity, your pet's health, your quality of life, your pet's quality of life, because like, nobody wants a sick pet. Like, that will definitely affect your quality of life, obviously your pet's quality of life. Nobody wants to see their pet suffer, and all of that affects you personally. Then you have to be like, oh, this research came out, but let me do a little more digging. Like,
Yeah.
who funded this? What school did this come out of? And most scientific studies do say what money was used for this testing. So
Mhm.
like, it is easy to find. You just have to be aware enough to look for it. And then
Yeah.
once you know, take it with a grain of salt.
So one of the things that is more concerning for me isn't necessarily the studies that they are doing, it's the studies that they're not doing.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Because when you are being funded by a huge conglomerate pet food company, you're not going to be able to use that money to study, for instance, how much more beneficial whole food nutrition is versus synthetic nutrition, right? Like you're not going to be able to do that with that money because the person, the company, the big conglomerate that gave you that money is going to say, psh, no, because what you're going to find is going to tell everybody in this country to not eat the food that I make, right? So it's not even what they're studying because they can be studying some really amazing things that are going to be really beneficial for a lot of animals who are very, very sick because potentially because they are eating this ultra processed food their whole lives. But then we also don't get the studies that would help people even more. Like that's, I think, what bothers
Yeah,
me.
because like you said, like they're trying to test something that will sell a product, right? They want the results to directly result in revenues. That's it. That's the whole point. So they are going to invest $8 million hoping they make $80 million as a result.
Exactly. And it's worth it to them for people to see, especially people in the veterinary community, to see, look at all this money that we're giving, look at all these studies that we're funding, look at these veterinary university veterinary centers that we're funding to help all of your pets through that cancer diagnosis, that, you know, CCL tear, that whatever it is, like to learn about like whatever veterinarians need to be learning about, cutting edge science, the next, I don't know, laser surgery, like equipment that they need to be buying to put in every veterinary out, whatever it may be, like they have that brand awareness and brand loyalty, and look how, like, just what is the word I'm looking for? Like people like them because they seem
Brand
so generous,
recognition.
because
Yeah,
they,
yeah, yeah.
yes. So that maybe isn't something that you can quantify the ROI on, but is definitely there. Definitely
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, Bronwyn says, prime example, Ella Vet is done by case study. And that's the comment you see notoriously. Our vet recommends it. And it is backed by science. While they're a good product, they're backed by science because they paid for the case study. Exactly. So like I can go and prove that my product is the best thing ever if I test for the things I know it does well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can leave out all the shortcomings. I can leave out, and you see this a lot with human stuff too. Like when I was pregnant, everybody's like folic acid, folic acid, folic acid. You need folic acid. And you have all these studies to prove that folic acid is good for you. But they're not telling you what kind of is it folic acid? Is it folate? Is it methylated folate? Which folate is it? Right. And so you're proving that it helps, but you're not also seeing how the biology of the animal or the human process it. You know, like if you have a genetic mutation that can't process folic acid, all that stuff you're taking is actually making you less healthy. But of course, if we find a sample of people that don't have that genetic mutation, we give them that thing and we say, it's so good. Look at that. It's so good for the baby. It's so good for the mom. Everybody's happy, but we left out all these people over here because we know that they're probably not going to thrive on this. I can do a study like that. If I've got the money, I could set that all up, right? Like I can hire a third party to do it and I can say third party testing and I can do all that because I have an understanding of what it does well and what it does bad. And I'm going to focus on the positive. And like, that's really what it comes down to. It's what are they testing and who's paying for it. And I mean, we don't need to like beat a dead horse, but like we've all gone to any kind of pet event. There's always a big conglomerate there. Like Bronwyn says, they're in the vet field, they're show ring, the athletic shows, they're everywhere. You know, I was just at the CFA International Cat Show and Expo, and like you have sponsors of all sorts. You have sponsors that are huge and super recognizable, and you have new sponsors. And you know, you can see that, and Super Zoo too, that's not a sponsorship, that's like a paid thing. And you see like the huge exhibits from the huge conglomerates where they have deeper pockets, and you see like the little table of like the smaller, you know, company that's either making pet food or that's selling a cat product, like you know, very niche products. You see the difference. So you see, when you see those exhibit spaces, you see the influence that these companies have, right? Because they've got the money. And that little company, I'll shout out Alchemy Pet, who does an amazing job. Colin is the founder, and they make they have a special encapsulation process for their supplements where they make it so much more bioavailable for pets. And it's a spray. It's very good. He says that he developed it with, Swedish nerd scientists while he was there. And it's just so great. And the way I met him is he was at Super Zoo in an emerging brands table, right? And like every day for that company is like, let's sell whatever we can to get our product out there. Let's work really grassroots to educate people. It's with a limited budget and limited investors and limited things, right? How can they compete with somebody that can literally go to a college campus, give millions of dollars and say, this is a great product, promote it to everybody?
Yeah.
Like they can't compete unless they're bought out and then they become part of that huge
Which we are
conglomerate.
seeing more and more often.
Yeah.
And I can't blame them. I mean, there are certainly small businesses that I would be very disappointed in the people that I know personally if they sold out, right? But like generally speaking, like I can't blame them at some point, especially if you work a company your whole life, right? At some point, it's like you want to retire, there are so many things to consider. But yeah, I want to just go through some of the things that Bronwyn said. Yeah, their food feeds, okay. So the case study for garlic on dogs, my gosh. So like they didn't even use real garlic. They used like the my brain isn't functioning.
Well, we have a comment that we need to we have it on YouTube. The pet food puzzle guy. He was a Hills veterinary rep for 34 years. I personally knew the board certified vet nutritionist who created the therapeutic diets. I loved seeing the results of those diets every day for years. I have to say something that you may not like, the pet food puzzle guy, is that because you were a rep for a company for 34 years and your salary and retirement pension, whatever you have as a result, depends on that company. I don't personally feel like you're like the most objective voice, but thank you for commenting, because I do always appreciate what people say, especially people who worked in the field. I also know people in your same capacity that have come out and said, I started a pet food brand because of what I saw at these huge manufacturers. So, you have to take it for what it is you obviously have a very positive experience and a positive testimonial, but there are people that have just as much experience within the industry that have left the industry to do better for the pets. So thank you for commenting. Of course, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share what you say. But again, it's just when there's money and there's influence, it's hard to kind of, for me, I can only speak for myself, to truly trust. When there's that much power, there's always like a question for me about how much of me or my pets or my family were truly considered.
Yeah. Well, and so this is something that I work with pets and pet parents every single day on, is that I have absolutely worked with pet parents, many, 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 many pet parents who their veterinarian did put them on a therapeutic prescription veterinary diet with if you're just listening to this later on, my quote fingers. And the reason that I use my quote fingers is because there's no medicine in these foods, but, and they do not go through like drug trials or anything like that. Now they do see results. They absolutely do. Results.
I did. I had a dog on a Hills for 6 years, and it definitely helped the issue. Absolutely.
But here's the reason. The reason is because they're coming from such poor nutrition to begin with. Now they're staying with very poor nutrition that has been altered to make adjustments for whatever condition that animal has been created in that animal. they're basically saying, okay, the food we fed you caused a problem. Whatever that problem is, we know that making this little adjustment is going to help. So we take that same ultra processed food. Oftentimes, and I say this with 100% certainty as a certified nutritionist. Oftentimes, the quality of that nutrition is even worse in that therapeutic or veterinary or prescription diet with that tiny little tweak for whatever it was, whether it's, a CD or an ID or whatever the heck it is. And yes, your animal is going to see improvements for that particular issue that was created. However, when we completely remove the ultra processed food, when we transition that animal to a species appropriate diet for whatever that animal is. So for a cat who is an obligate carnivore, we are going to feed them very similarly to a prey model diet because they are an obligate carnivore. When we switch a dog who is a facultative carnivore over to a primarily protein diet with some veggies, fat, of course, we see not only the issue that ultra processed food diet created go away, we also see the overall health of that animal significantly improve. So while I will absolutely not knock your experience, because I completely I can see that. I talk to pet parents every day who are like, my vet told me to put my dog or cat on this prescription, whatever diet, and I haven't had the issue since. I get that. I see that every day too. However, we can do so much better.
Well, I will say, for personal experience, I had a dog that had urinary incontinence, and it was not like, she was 6 months old and she had all sorts of issues. Crystals was the diagnosis. Immediately changed her to CD, and like overnight, she could hold her bladder again. And so it was amazing. And I went to 3 vets before anybody prescribed that. And I was so grateful for that solution. But we can all agree that corn as a primary ingredient is not a long-term solution, right? So like, and I was kind of stuck because that food did help. And honestly, she was like, I had to crate her overnight. She could only go 3 because she was peeing all over the house. And so in her crate, she would hold it as long as she could, and then she couldn't hold it anymore. So then I didn't want to go back to waking up every 2 hours, like with an infant. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't want to. So I kept her on it for fear that I didn't have any other choices. And she is the dog that lived the least. I mean, I have very long living dogs. We switched her to a whole food, raw, homemade diet as soon as I was able to in 2015. She thrived on that diet. And long story short, we learned that all she needed was an episiotomy to make the crystal and urinary tract infections and, vaginosis go away. And it was just because she had an extra skin fold. She needed a booty lift for dogs. But of course, the solution I was offered was way more expensive than the surgery, was a Band-Aid for the surgery, right? And it did not do her well long term. Again, the solution for short term to get things under control, absolutely. She could have been put on that food, and then the episiotomy could have been done, and then she could have thrived without any special food. And that food's very expensive. So that $1,500 surgery would have been so much more worth it than like 6 years of veterinary food. And like, a lot of times pet parents are told like this is the only option. And why do we say that? Because some research proved it, but nobody's researching what Jessica just said, because there's no money to prove that. Right? Like what you just said, you can't bottle up and sell because you don't have the money to create these, to either even do a survey. How expensive, surveys are expensive, and how seriously would they even take it if you funded it? They wouldn't.
Yeah.
So like, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
No, and Bronwyn, I don't worry about blaming myself, but thank you for saying that. I don't. Hindsight is 2020. It did teach me a lot. The episioplasty I thought was so cruel, to give a dog a booty lift, and now I wouldn't hesitate to do it within like a month of adoption. You know what I mean? Like, now that I know what I know. So and I went and I did all I could for her. Like you said, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I went to vets like over and over and over again, and even some vets were like, like the first two didn't give me a veterinary diet because they didn't know that was really going to help, and the third one did, and it was a solution. Pet food puzzle guy says, if you feed a cat with renal disease a species appropriate diet, you will be feeding excess phosphorus and probably excess protein that will worsen the disease. That is proven science. Oh boy, I can't wait to hear what Jessica has to say about this.
First, with renal disease, late stage renal disease, we do need to, during any stage of renal disease, we do want to use phosphorus binders in addition to a species appropriate diet. If we're already in stage 4 renal disease, we do need to decrease the protein. Oftentimes, I would not want to decrease the protein prior to that, because as an obligate carnivore, they are going to have to get their amino acids from somewhere, which means they are going to pull their amino acids from their muscles. So they're going to suffer from muscle wasting and probably not do worse on with a muscle wasting. However, if we were not feeding a cat a dry diet without moisture to begin with, they probably wouldn't have developed the renal disease. So that's my.
And then he I'm assuming he, because it says the pet food puzzle guy. Are you basing your opinions on marketing from people selling food with no credentials? Define credentials first and foremost, or the credentialed board certified nutritionists who study nutrient delivery rather than ingredients? How, and I'm not a nutritionist of any sort, but how do you study nutrient delivery without worrying about ingredients? I just don't understand.
That's a very common
that is
common marketing thing for
yes.
big pet food. Very, very
big
common.
Pet food. Ingredients
matter,
are critical. That's why we care about the quality of the ingredients. I mean, I am assuming the pet food puzzle guy does not eat protein shakes at every meal, right? Like, I'm assuming that he probably, if he were to have children or grandchildren or
eats real food,
he wants them to eat a banana every once in a while, despite the nutrient delivery that it may provide. So corn as the first ingredient. I'm not saying that a corn as a filler. I said it's the primary ingredient.
But so, go ahead. It's not necessarily, corn is not biologically appropriate for dogs or cats. So
it provides energy, fatty acids, protein, is what he says.
But if you don't need that if you're feeding meat. So not
I don't eat. Listen, I don't eat corn, so like I try to there's no point for me to eat corn. So yeah, definitely, it's not something that I'd feed my children over like a grilled steak or a grilled
not the corn
chicken.
we have today. It's all GMO, and I'm not doing that either for myself. But I think that just going back to like what we were talking about from the beginning. What we were talking about from the beginning is that there is certainly a lot of benefit in these veterinary schools receiving the funding. We just have to be smart about understanding that there's also a lot of corruption and conflicts of interest, and especially where nutrition is concerned.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is how, I'm a parent. And I have a special needs child. And so we talk a lot about nutrition for all of the appointments that we go to. Every single doctor we've seen, whether they're holistic, whether they're a dentist, whether they're a sleep study, provider, whether they're a nurse practitioner, psychologist, psychiatrist, pediatrician, they're all always one of the first 10 questions they ask us is, what's his diet like? How much dairy is he having? How much sugar is he having? How many, how much about of his food intake is fresh foods, vegetables and fruits, and how much of the, colors, the dyes and the artificial sweeteners and things is he getting? And the reason they ask that is because we know, based on science, that food affects us. It affects our brain, it affects our gut, it affects our energy levels. And we know what is good for humans. And it'd be very hard to find a doctor who says you should eat a protein shake 3-4 times a day, never eat vegetables, never, it doesn't matter because whatever was in that broccoli is now in your protein shake. It's very hard to find somebody who'd be like, yeah, that sounds like a really good way to eat, right? Like feed your 7-year-old protein shakes every day. Like nobody has ever said that to me. And it's because we know that there is food that is optimal and there's food that is convenient and then there's food that is suboptimal, and we kind of live in those three places as humans. So why would it be different for any other animal? Why would it be that they can eat the equivalent of Doritos every day, and because somebody says that it's an ingredient that delivers optimal nutrients, why can't I feed that to my kids then? Like, why is nobody coming up with the equivalent for a 7-year-old? Do you know how easy it would be for me to just throw kibble on a plate for my 7-year-old if that was do you know
Yeah.
how I would be 100% on board? Like, give me the kibble for the kid and spray it with like maple syrup so he loves
Give
it.
me a Peloton. Yeah.
Please, like I would love it, but like we know that that's not the way it works. So like intellectually, like I can never like see this dead food. And I'm not against protein shakes. Like I think if they're a meal, if you use a supplement, a meal replacement once a day or a few times a week, like I think that's fine. Whatever. Do you? I if I had more time, I'd probably make a delicious protein-based smoothie every morning, but I don't because I'm lazy. But I will tell you this, like I don't think that what we're feeding our pets is optimal. And I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just a pet parent and a mom. And I can tell you that the propaganda that has made us all think that, that these foods are normal is what it is. It's propaganda. Like we have been brainwashed to think that all these things are great because some veterinary nutritionist who's paid by a big brand said they were great. We have to remember to trust our intuition and to trust our like inner knowing, and like we have to know that there's a better way. And so many people have reported, like you and I both have people on our show that do this for a living, like Bronwyn, who educate people because of what they have seen. Like they went from the conventional foods and they did not have the results they wanted. And then they switch things up radically and they were able to extend their pets' lives, improve their quality of life. So you can't tell people that processed foods are good and expect them to believe you. And you can't tell people that, that feeding fresh foods is bad because we all know that it's not. Is it more convenient? Sure. Give me the kibble for the kid. I'm in. Like, but like how, like, can you imagine the behavior I'd see? Can you imagine like how sluggish that child would be in the morning? Can you imagine the lack of concentration that child would have at school if I'm feeding the equivalent of what's in kibble?
Yeah.
Like you couldn't pay a parent to do that.
I mean, the argument really is that, these companies are basing their information off of ingredient profiles nutritional profiles that were developed out of a necessity because pet foods were harming, right? And then they are testing individual synthetic nutrients. To my knowledge, there has never been a study done with all of these synthetic nutrients put together for an extended period of time. Like AFCO feeding trials are a joke. It's like 6 months and 8 dogs, 6 of them have to make it to the end. Like AFCO feeding trials are a joke. But that's a whole other story, a whole other topic. The reality is that nature, granted, and we've talked about this so many times, like we are destroying the planet, and nutrient levels in foods are not what they were 100 years ago. We have to make adjustments for that. Even so, real food and the nutrients that we get from real food and the co-nutrients that are in an apple or a piece of spinach or a chicken heart or whatever actual food we're talking about, we can't replicate that. To say that we can is playing God, and not to like take it to a whole other level, but like, no, like that's just not. Nature gives us what we need, and we just have to be smart about putting it together and feeding our pets in a way that is natural for them based on their species.
Yeah,
That's all I
for
have to
sure.
say.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, and he agrees with you that the AFCO feeding trials are a joke. Love you, Bronwyn. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I just feel like at the end of the day, what we were trying to share is that the corruption is there. And it's in every industry, and it's in every political party. And like, I'm very like cynical. And I mean, this is my family's in Spain. My family's from Spain and Ecuador, and I've grown up in the United States. And like, this is not a United States issue, right? Like, this is not unique to us in any way. Like, these things happen all over the world. And again, like I've said in the past, these companies and the veterinary the trials that they conduct on their own behalf affect the whole world, right? Because these brands are sold everywhere, and they affect pets everywhere, and they cost pet parents extra money in veterinary costs everywhere. So it's not like something that we take lightly, because it really has a huge effect. And all we want to share is always educate yourself, find out where the money came from, who funded each study, what was the purpose, what were they trying to prove, what do they stand to gain from it. And this is not just for your pets, this is for your kids, this is for yourself, this is for your home, this is products that you're considering, and they have amazing marketing, and then you get them and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that this happened to me. Like, this amazing brand, such great marketing, doctor led, da 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 da. I order a deodorant, among other things, a deodorant from this brand, and it has aluminum in it. And I'm like, it's 2024 and a doctor is still recommending aluminum in deodorant? Like, how?
Girl,
And I you know what I mean? Like,
I told you. I haven't worn deodorant in years.
I know. I do.
I remember telling you that, and you were like, but you don't stink. And I'm like, I know.
I'm like sniffing you. I'm like, no, you always smell so good. What are you talking about? But yeah, like, I fell for the marketing. I fell for the doctor led. I fell for the great ingredients. I fell for that marketing. And I was like shocked when I got the product, because I didn't do my due diligence. I went off of that first impression. I went off of that first, the copy that was used to sway me. And I'm a copywriter, so I know how that works, right? So like, it was copy that swayed me to make a choice and to make a purchase, and then I was disappointed. And when it comes to the same thing that happens with media and like new studies that come out and new things, just before you buy into whatever they're reporting, just know that there are vested interests, and conflicts of interest are more common than they are not, right? Like, they really are more common than they're not. We talk about them like they're some kind of like rare occurrence. No, their conflicts of interest are everywhere. They're more common than they're not. And it is what it is. Like,
yeah, it is.
It's part of
It is. We have to be so much more diligent as consumers. And I think that is the bottom line. is, I don't care what we're talking about, you have to be responsible for where you put your money and the products you bring into your home and what you choose to feed your kids and your pets. Like, it is your responsibility. We have to know in this day and age that everything we see and hear is marketing. I don't even like us, right? Like, we're promoting our podcast. We're like, seriously, like, we have good intentions, but still, you as a consumer need to do your due diligence and say, do I trust those people or do I not? And maybe you do and maybe you don't.
Right.
That's up to you.
Yeah.
I obviously I work with clients. I do one-on-ones. I'm like, I'm out here to make a
Yeah.
living, but I'm
Correct.
also providing you the best information that I can.
Right. And the pet food puzzle guy, I challenge you to read, based on your last comment, there are no geriatrics in nature. Science takes nature, and we can manage all kinds of health conditions manipulating nutrients. I challenge you to read The Forever Dog by Dr. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib. I really do challenge you to read that book. It is so great. And it's
considering the decrease in lifespan in our dogs and cats in the past 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
The decrease is insanity.
Of pet dogs, right? Like not in nature, but of pet dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. And not even talking about health span, just talking about lifespan.
Yeah. And actually, I grew up in Ecuador where we didn't have pet food when I was growing up. And my mom used to go and source like the bones and the organs, because that's like, it wasn't like we didn't have the choice. Like I was born in 1980, and I guess, I don't know, like maybe it was just not there yet. I don't know if it was too expensive for what we were, for our pets or whatever. And I remember like these dogs living for they were great, healthy dogs, because they were just like, I just, I just think that a really good thing to do is, if you have been in the pet food industry for 34 years, just read the book that kind of challenges a lot of the beliefs held there, which is The Forever Dog, again, by Dr. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib. And he's very science driven. So Rodney is. And
everything in those books is 100%
exactly
cited scientific studies.
Yeah. So, just sometimes we have to kind of challenge ourselves to read things that don't set well with us, listen to a podcast of somebody that we maybe don't like, just to see what it is that people are saying, that another side to the story. Dianico, it was so nice for you to pop by. Thank you so much for coming. I just want to wish everybody a super happy holiday season. This is the last time we're coming to you for the weekly pet roundup this year in 2024. I can't believe that 2024 is gone. It flew by. I traveled so much. I did so much. It was an epic year for me professionally. It was such a great year, like really, truly, like it's like dreams come true every day for me. I am so grateful for you guys tuning in. I'm so grateful for you guys, following my show, Covered in Pet Hair. And I wish you guys all the best, you, your pets, your families. I hope you have a good holiday season, no matter what happens. I'm just reading the response to, I can't believe it's nearly Christmas holidays. I know, 1 week, and it's the 23rd, like really next Monday is the 23rd of December. So like,
crazy.
And for those who celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, those are coming up. So just happy holidays to all of you, whatever else you celebrate. I want to just remind everybody that the holidays can be tough. I've done a lot of shows with people about grief that are coming up. I've talked about, just like family gatherings that can really wear on you, especially if you're grieving the loss of a pet, so like, please seek out comfort and support wherever you need it. Maybe, I did a Thanksgiving episode, not this year, but the year before, where it was like, if you don't want to be at a party or it gets too difficult, excuse yourself. Those things are okay. You have our support to like protect yourself over the holiday season, especially if you're grieving the loss of a pet. I I can't imagine what it is like to go into a holiday season knowing that, a huge part of your life is missing. So give yourself grace and know that it's normal and that it's okay and that grief does not have a timeline. So I hope that everybody's really enjoying the holidays, but I want to acknowledge that the holidays can be really tough for some people. So my heart goes out to you, my support goes out to you, and my love goes out to everybody, no matter what holiday season you're planning, whether it's a stay at home like me and get the house in order, or if it's a jet set to Paris for New Year's, whatever you're doing. I hope you have a great time, and I hope it's safe, and I hope it's lovely.
The jet set sounds good. I
Right?
couldn't say it any better. Have a wonderful rest of your 2024.
Yes, 2 weeks, and then they can be isolating for some. Absolutely. The holidays can be very isolating. Especially for those of us that are grieving, people don't know how to support
Yeah.
those that are grieving.
No,
They just
especially
don't.
this time of year.
Yeah, they just don't.
Okay.
They want you to snap out of it because your
Yep.
feelings are uncomfortable and inconvenient for them. And that's just human nature. That's not making them wrong or bad. It's just how human nature is. Like, we just want to be happy. Like, let's just be happy. No uncomfortable feelings. But if you have uncomfortable feelings, seek out support. Actually DM me if you do need any kind of grief support. I have a lot of friends in the industry that offer support, that literally specialize in grief, pet loss and grief. And yes, especially when it's a pet, people don't know. Like, they might know what to say if you have recently widowed, but they don't know what to say if you lost, your forever dog, right? Like your best friend, or cat or hamster or whatever it is that you lost. There's really no way to explain what relationship you have with your pet. So don't even try, but definitely take care of your heart and take care of yourself. And join us on the first week that we'll do another weekly pet roundup. Will be the 6th of January. The 6th of January. And I would love to talk about our pet parent resolutions like we did this year. We started the year with pet parent resolutions. I said I was going to do more dental care. Spoiler alert, I failed at that. I did not continue my dental care for my pets.
I don't remember what mine was, so I guess I failed too.
I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm just going to tell you that a whole F+ for me on that one. But yeah, like, let's talk about pet parent resolutions. If you had any, join us and let us know if you were able to make them. If you were able to make them, and if not, what are you going to do this year to make it better? And the pet food puzzle guy says, I know both of them and Dr. Morgan, and I appreciate listening to the other sides, and I do appreciate you guys' passion, and we appreciate yours. So thank you for commenting. Yeah. Thank you for joining.
It was a great discussion.
I agree. And I only got a notification about 5 minutes ago that we were live. So we will do this. We try to do this every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. That is, just to make it easy for the whole world. 5 p.m. Eastern every Monday. And it's the weekly pet roundup. So we cover whatever topic. It's not always nutrition. Obviously, we have a nutrition expert here, Jessica. I love news. I'm a journalist, so I want to bring in anything that's like trending, anything that people are talking about, anything that people have asked us about, and things that are just helpful for pet parents too. Like, we'll talk about things seasonally as well. So if you ever have any recommendations for us, please let us know. But we will see you on January 6th, God willing. And we hope you have a wonderful holiday season and a happy 2020, end of 2024, beginning of 2025.
We'll see you in 2025. Bye, guys.
Time is flying. Bye.